Since we're working on light and shadow and value, we are going to practice shading a sphere today. And a sphere, remember, is a 3D looking shape. So it has width, height, and depth. And what makes a 2D shape, my circle, turn into a sphere is that it looks like it has light. So we have a highlight, a shadow, and we have the cast shadow. The light comes from here and makes a shadow. If you've ever made a shadow puppet, you've seen that before. If you have it, you can use a sphere from home, like a round object, any sort of round object, or if you don't have anything round, like not even a soccer ball or a baseball or anything, you can just practice by looking at this that is in the material section of this lesson. I'm going to practice drawing my sphere on a white piece of paper. Mine's a square, just so that you can see my example while I'm doing this. I'm going to switch sides because I'm right-handed. Okay. So I'm going to start by drawing my best circle that I can. And then I'm going to very lightly with my pencil just draw in the highlight because I don't want to fill this in. I want this to be very white. So I'm going to leave this part white on my paper. Then I'm going to find my cast shadow. So the light's coming from this direction, which means that my shadow, my paper is not big enough. I drew my circle too big. It's going to come this direction. It is going to be so dark. So I'm going to use my pencil to shade really dark for my cast shadow. See how dark it is up there. I'm doing this quickly, so mine is not going to look as great as yours. I'll finish it and then I'll show you. Then I'm going to have this really dark part of my shadow because when the light comes from here, the light doesn't go all the way down and hit the bottom because it gets stopped by the side here. See how the light doesn't come down all the way to here. So there's a shadow down here. I'm going to draw that in really dark too because shadows are dark. They're the absence of light. There's no light. And because my ball is a sphere, the shadow has a curve to it. So my shadow has a curve. Then you can see on my picture here that it gets lighter as it gets closer to the highlight. That's because some of the light is still coming down, and before it wraps around the outside where it doesn't get any light anymore, it still has a little bit of light, but less and less as it gets lower down. So I'm going to still shade in my sphere, but I'm going to use less and less pressure on my pencil. You can see that it's getting lighter and lighter. Then as I get close to my highlight, it gets so light that you almost can't even see it. So I'm going to practice a little bit more. I'm going to try and fade this in so that you can't see the difference between where it's really dark and where it gets light. I'm going to fade it in and see if we can make a really, really smooth transition from dark to light. And I'll come back and we'll look at it together. Now that I've worked on it a little bit more, you can see I actually erased my line where my highlight was because there's no dark line around here. It's all very smooth. You can see there's no dark line. You can also see that I worked really hard to make sure that mine blended from dark to light. You don't see any lines where it's just really dark and then really light. Let's look at one that looks like that. So here's one that I made that looks like it just has a line and then there's no shading or blending where it goes from light to dark like a value scale. It just has this dark line, and that doesn't look like a sphere in real life. Oops. So your goal is to make it as smooth as possible. All right. After you have drawn this shadow or after you've drawn the shadow on the bottom of it, make sure that you go back in and you make your cast shadow really dark too. Remember, your light's coming from here and then down here. All right, I'm excited to see your spheres.